there are many problems with the country at the moment. Many challenges. We can agree on that, but that's not to do with Brexit. That is to do with the utter failure of this Conservative government to run the country properly.
So Nigel Farage, one of the biggest proponents of Brexit, has said that it has failed. Do you agree?
What he actually said was the Tories have failed Brexit, and therefore Brexit so far is not delivering. And that got interpreted by the media in ways that you can understand. Look, Brexit itself as a concept, as an opportunity for the nation, is still there. It's still a great opportunity. But like anything in life, if you're going to do a job, we all do jobs, if you're going to do a job, either do it properly to the best of your ability, or don't frankly bother doing it at all. And our criticism is that the Tories who are running the country, they haven't taken advantage of the opportunities, and we can debate whether or not those are genuine opportunities. But fundamentally, the campaign was take control of money, laws and borders, and they haven't done a single one of those three things. They haven't reduced taxes to create more growth. They haven't got rid of unnecessary regulations, and in fact they've opened the borders rather than controlled them.
But this is very could have, would have, should have. The
Yes,
fact
correct.
remains that Brexit has failed. It's an absolute tangible disaster now, and all the evidence is there for us to see.
Such
So
as
for the
what-
first
what-
time in
what
my
is-
life, I find myself agreeing wholeheartedly with Nigel Farage. And on that video, he was very clear. He
So
said
when you say-
Brexit has failed. Those are the words he said. The economy's been battered. The NHS is suffering. There's sewage in our waters. Fishing has been absolutely clobbered. Farming is on
Hang on,
its knees. We have low
Sewage has got
productivity.
nothing to do with Brexit.
We have
the
worse
NHS has got
growth.
nothing to do with Brexit.
It
the
has.
failure.
It is
the
all
NHS,
linked.
The NHS has more money poured into it than ever, way more than
We have
that number
lost
on the side
so
of the
many workers, and there are labour shortages across the board. And
There's
yet,
not- there's not a labour
with the
shortage in this country.
highest net
There is
migration,
We've got a record population in this country. We've just had 1.2 million people come into the country last year. So we've got a record number of people. What we've got is a willing worker shortage because, regrettably, we've got 5.2 million on benefits. It doesn't, for many people, work doesn't pay. The tax system is too high. These are all things the Tories have brought into place. So look, there are many problems with the country at the moment. Many challenges. We can agree on that, but that's not to do with Brexit. That is to do with the utter failure of this Conservative government to run the country properly.
no, it 100% is to do with Brexit. We've
Give me some
hampered
evidence.
business.
Give me some evidence of something that has gone wrong because of Brexit.
All right, so one off the top of my head is that we culled 120,000 perfectly healthy pigs because they had a shortage of agricultural workers to do that. Now, that's just one little travesty.
It's a false piece of evidence. That's
No,
not
it
the number that was
100% isn't,
culled.
because whilst, yes, we have a record amount of people coming to the country and we haven't put any money into services or building houses in the last 10
I'm going
years.
to challenge you on this
which
pig
is-
thing. It's really important because we've got a seasonal agricultural workers scheme that replaced freedom of movement, in which tens of thousands of people can come over for a number of months to deal with that.
It
sort of
hasn't
thing.
worked. If you talk to farmers, if you actually talk to the
I talk to
people,
farmers every week.
Yeah, well, then you'll know. I mean, there's evidence all over the place. If you look at someone like Liz Webster, who's really sticking up for them and has got so many campaigns going on, and you talk to them themselves, they don't have the workers. And
So-
this idea, you say about all those people being on benefits, yes, absolutely. But many
want
of
to
them
write
are
these people off.
working. No, many of them are working already, and they have the benefits to
Let me tell you what
complement
they're
their
doing.
meagre wages.
They're working up to 16 hours a week, claiming benefits of the balance because their net weekly take-home pay is more than if they were working 40 hours a week. That's a flawed system that's got nothing to do with Brexit. That's because of a benefit system that isn't getting our
Okay.
own people back into work.
Let's go back to things like the Good Friday Agreement and how both John Major and Tony Blair spoke about how Northern Ireland was going to be affected really detrimentally by Brexit. These are things that were brushed under the carpet by campaigns like Leave EU. Now, I watched your Leave EU advert on the way here today, and honestly, I looked at that and I thought, I am not surprised people saw that and voted for Brexit. You promised that we would be living in something equivalent to a spa. The music was beautiful, the light was rosy, and you told us that education would be fantastic, that the NHS would be amazing. You get a doctor's appointment pretty much the next day, that every aspect of our lives would be improved, that our weekly food shop would be down. This was lies, a pack of lies, because not one of those things has come true.
These are opportunities that still exist with a government that runs the country properly. It's absolutely
You can't blame
clear.
a government who had an 80-seat majority where they literally got rid of anybody who wanted a softer Brexit or who didn't want Brexit at all.
80-seat majority, they could have done it and they haven't.
Why didn't they?
Because they've chosen through incompetence not to do it.
No,
and because
it's
actually the truth is many of them actually didn't believe in Brexit, and we've got a civil service that has put up roadblocks every single possible along the way in order to try and prevent it from happening.
Do you know, the whole con about if you believe in Brexit a bit harder, it's going to be absolutely marvellous, I think has gone down the toilet. If you look at polls now, even a really high percentage of leavers regret it. They think it has failed.
20% regret it.
No,
do you remember the polls in the week?
The
polls in the week up to the referendum were the same as the polls now. Guess what? On the day we won the referendum. It's like any job. If you're going to do it properly, or don't do it at all.
But do you know what? Okay, so before the referendum and during it, okay, we had this debate. And what I would say was a failure on the Remain side was that it was a negative debate. It was all like, if we do this, this will happen. Now, those things were true. Those things were true.
You're highlighting the lies.
Those things were
George
true.
Osborne said 500,000 people would lose their jobs. There'd be an emergency budget. The economy would go down the pan in the immediate aftermath. None of those things happened.
Those things were exaggerations. They were exaggerations, but a smaller. No, you actually did lie, because the NHS is tangibly on its knees, and the country's in a state.
The NHS has got more money than it's ever had before, Gemma. Come on,
Richard. People aren't stupid. They go to the shop and they can't afford their weekly shop. Our fuel bills. Now, I know that there's other factors. Yes,
have
absolutely.
You heard of the energy crisis?
Of course.
Have you heard of the madness of net zero putting up our energy bills?
Of course.
Nothing to do with Brexit.
Anybody with half a brain understands that these things are nuanced and they are complex. And of course, things like the Ukraine war have a massive impact on our food prices as well. But by putting in barriers, by raising the price of our exports, our imports, we have got less investment. That is just a fact. We
haven't raised the price of our exports.
Sorry, I know that was the wrong way to say that. Our imports, yes. But by putting in...
It's not the price has gone up. Right? What this government unbelievably has put in place unnecessary paperwork on imports. I agree with you on that. But again, that's an utter failure of implementation as opposed to the concept, the opportunity. I come back. The opportunity is there. If I was running the country, let me tell you, this would be a great success. And people were saying, thank heavens, thank God, why didn't we do it sooner?
I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. I really don't. Let's look at the infrastructure. Okay, so the reason that, okay, you know that in October things are going to get even worse when checks finally come in. The checks that they've delayed 4 times now because
the government...
we
don't need to bring in. If I was running the country, those checks wouldn't be there because they're not needed. This is the madness of the hopeless civil service failure of implementation.
But also, you know what? It's really interesting. So they only are not needed if you want to not care about standards anymore, or health, or safety. You know, these idea that regulations are bad is an absolute nonsense.
Smart regulations are good. Daft regulations are bad.
Well, some of those regulations that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg want to throw in the bin are workers' regulations. And I personally think that having our weekends protected, having maternity pay protected,
Has Jacob
having
said he
all
wants
of
to put
those
those
things,
workers' regulations in the bin?
he is a disaster capitalist. He has made a huge amount of money. And that is why we've now got 177 billionaires in this country. And while normal people are suffering, and every single household, depending on what you read, between £1,000 and £4,000 a year worse off. £1,000 is a lot of money.
Policy is to help the least well off by lifting the starting point at which you pay income tax with the Reform UK's policy from 12.5 grand to 20 grand. If you run the country properly, if you focus the opportunities on the lowest paid, the least well off, you get millions of people back into jobs. You protect our own citizens, which means you don't need to import cheap, low-skilled labour from overseas. The first role of government, look after your own people. That's what this government's for. Where you and I agree is this government is utterly hopeless.
Okay, so if you look at that and you look about the idea that if you left the EU, you could have higher wages and less competition. Okay, now that's a theory, but in actual fact, what it's done is it's risen wage bills, and so it's reduced competitiveness and ultimately reduced growth. So there's always a yin and yang, and it's always been about extremes.
Isn't it funny?
And we've had this divisiveness. And you know what? Scotland has been completely ignored. Northern Ireland has been completely ignored. Swathes of the population are just thinking, if they didn't want this, well, what have I got out of this? And then plus the people who have been failed as well by Tories, in the last decade,
I'm not a Tory.
where they have left places to rot, quite frankly. They haven't funded public services. So it was very easy for Nigel Farage and his ilk to come in and put posters up and say, it's their fault, and we're about to receive all these people over from Turkey.
I'm really glad you mentioned the point about growth, because you may remember that Germany is still in the European Union, right? Germany is in recession. The United Kingdom is flatlining, but it's not in recession, right? The UK's growth since the referendum has exceeded Germany, has exceeded
That's
Italy,
because we
has
were
exceeded
so
France.
far behind because of Brexit. We plunged and then we made up for it.
So when I prove the evidence that you don't
Germany
like the facts,
are doing really badly, but I don't care. I care about Britain.
You just talked about growth, and I've just said that we're growing faster.
In terms of the G20, we're doing worse than flipping Russia, who have been
because you're relying on IMF data
them.
from 6 months ago that
but
they've just had to upgrade.
But it's the IMF data who have upgraded.
They've just had to upgrade it.
Do you believe them or not? Because you're using IMF data to say that we're not going to be in recession.
Germany is in recession, and Germany is in the European Union. And since we left the EU, we've outperformed Germany, Italy, Spain, and the only country that succeeded us. It's not a manipulation. It's a question of GDP. You can't ask for you can't say the evidence is all there that Brexit's failed. And when I provide the evidence that we're outperforming European Union countries since the referendum, you ignore it and say that's a manipulation of the data.
Think how well we'd be doing if we hadn't Brexited.
We'd be doing well if we'd done it properly, Gemma.
Over the last few years, we hadn't spent this time with families divided, hampering opportunities for the young as well. My kids. I'm not coming at this from a political point of view. I'm not affiliated to any political party, okay? But I have 2 teenagers. They are the first generation who are guaranteed to do worse than the previous generation. We have failing young people. They will not be able to get on the housing ladder. They'll be living with me until they're middle-aged, which is okay.
Well, and one of the reasons they're failing, it's hard to get on the housing ladder, is because we had unlimited freedom of movement. We had no idea how many people in the country. And that meant that when people thought there were 3.5 million people from the EU living here, it turned out there were 6.5 million people.
We know you're very anti-immigration. Other people think that the net benefit of immigration
I want to welcome
is worth it.
high-skilled immigration that helps for our country.
Ways. I met a young girl the other day, a student, state school, lovely girl, working class parents, very talented academic, and really enjoys French. Okay, and she's like, yeah, I want to go and do a degree, but it's a bit sad because you used to be able to go and spend loads of time, and they've stopped doing that now because it's too much hassle. Do you know what? Brexit to me just represents hassle. It represents wasted time, wasted emotion, wasted money. The EU,
I tell you why it took a long time, because the Remainers, who said they would accept the will of the people, then spent 3 years trying to stop the will of the people. We should have got on with it with some proper leadership and done the job properly. Then all of the young people would be welcoming it because they'd be seeing even higher growth, they'd be seeing higher wages and the great opportunities. And we live in a global world, Gemma, not just a world that's centred around the failing EU.
They're just a massive trading bloc right on our doorstep for environmental reasons.
Who's our biggest single trading partner?
We have literally just found out that we are not going to get a trade deal with the US. That was reported this week.
And who is our biggest single trading partner
the EU.
At the moment? No, it's the United States of America. That is our biggest single trading partner with any single country, and we have a big trade surplus. So yeah, if we could get a trade deal where we could increase that surplus, great. But if we can get a bad trade deal, then no, we wouldn't do it. That's called sovereignty. What would you like Keir Starmer to do if he is the next Prime Minister with regard to our relationship with the EU? Do you want him to rejoin?
I don't know whether we can rejoin, because I don't know whether the EU would have us back. And if they did have us back, I think the deal would be way, way worse than we had before. We were in a pretty privileged position. However, I think his language being so absolute about not aligning is weird and ridiculous, because either he means that and that's stupid, or he doesn't mean it and then he's going to be lying. So that's where I am with Starmer. I don't know what he means, and I hope he shows his teeth. but I'm very, very depressed about their stance on it as well.
But I think
because
your
to
point
understand.
I think your point is what you're really saying is you don't know whether the EU would have us back, and if we went back, we haven't got any negotiating leverage. We're agreed. So let's actually, having left, let's now do it properly. In any job, we all do our jobs.
Our idea
do
of
it
what
properly.
that would be
what that means. But you've talked
different.
about growth. You've talked about opportunities for young people. You've talked about higher wages. All of those things are possible if we do Brexit properly. That's why I want to get the lowest paid to get more net take-home pay by lifting the income tax threshold. That's one of the great opportunities that this government refuses to do.
But that's got nothing to do whether you Brexited or not.
It
Any
does actually,
government
because if you
can
cut
do
unnecessary daft waste and regulations, then that frees up the money.
I don't
to
trust
make
those getting rid of regulations. I actually like good food standards, good health and safety standards.
And do you like?
And I like clean
cookies?
water as well, like the EU Clean Water Directive, which now they can just pour raw sewage into our waters.
But we had sewage going into our waters before Brexit.
We did a bit, but not as much.
Because of the appalling behaviour of our privatised water companies that I want to nationalise.
Agree.
You see, I'm getting you there. You're coming my way, Jemma.
No, I won't be voting for your party. But also, what about the chemicals that we used to get in the short-time supply chains that cleaned the water before it went into the thing?
We can make them ourselves. We can get them
but
from all
we
over
don't.
the world.
But we don't. And
we
again,
could
that
do.
is a Brexit benefit is in our water. And so that's not something I think is particularly great
it's
either.
got
And that
nothing to do
wasn't on the
with Brexit.
side
It
of a
was
bus.
There we are, a spicy, fiery debate as you would expect at the home of Common Sense, TalkTV. If you like it, then click on likes, give us some comments, sign up to the brilliant TalkTV.